The rise of new guides showed that leadership in contact work meant humility, care, and the ability to train others to replace you. Welcome to the channel, My UFO Encounters. All the stories are based on real events. My field experiences, travels, and late-night studies, observations, and conversations with these beings from other planets. I'm fulfilling their request to bring the knowledge gained from all these years of conversations to all humanity. To this end, I create stories with guidance and knowledge from them. Welcome to this universe. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe about extraterrestrial contact. Guides did not appear in the circles because someone wanted power. They emerged because the practice itself demanded caretakers. A guide was never a leader in the conventional sense. They were simply the first to arrive and the last to leave, the one who kept silence when adrenaline surged, and the one who remembered to ask the dull questions when drama wanted to take the stage. In the early years, guides were the veterans who had endured dozens of nights of nothing and had learned to treat nothing as valuable data. The role crystallized around three tasks: preparing, protecting, and passing on. Preparing meant helping the circle arrive clean. No caffeine jitters, no devices glowing into eyes, no expectations that could snap under silence. Protecting meant creating an atmosphere where attention was wide, words were few, and newcomers could learn without shame. Passing on meant ensuring that every person in the field could eventually run the same process without needing the guide. Authority was measured by how well you could distribute authority. Training a new guide began with observation. Veterans modeled how to set the tone during pre-briefs, reviewing weather, satellite trains, aircraft corridors, and reminding everyone to hydrate before adrenaline. They demonstrated how to check compasses quietly, how to signal silence with a gesture instead of a shout, and how to correct posture with patience rather than pride. Newcomers watched, imitated, and eventually led portions of the process themselves. The ethic of anonymity shaped the role profoundly. Guides were never named or celebrated. Their work was invisible by design. If you could identify a guide by personality, the practice had already failed. The goal was not to create figures, but to create methods. A successful guide was one you forgot was guiding because the group itself felt steady. Dreams during this phase often reflected the weight of responsibility. People reported visions of being shown how to hold silence like an object, how to stand still even as brightness surged, how to listen to the rhythm of a group's breath and adjust their own until coherence spread. These were not dreams of destiny. They were tutorials in care. Participants woke not with pride but with humility, aware that their task was not to shine but to disappear into the method. By the time the role of the guide had matured, the circles had discovered that the most powerful form of leadership was not command, but steadiness. A guide's authority came not from charisma but from capacity, the ability to keep breathing, keep writing, and keep caring when others wanted to rush. The curriculum for new guides was written in mistakes. A guide's first challenge was learning to keep the group steady when error tried to scatter it. When a bright planet in 2003 fooled half a circle into thinking it hovered, the guide's job was not to lecture but to slow the breath, remind the group to write, and only later compare logs against predictable motions. The correction happened in debrief, not in the moment, because humiliation never teaches steadiness. Field errors became modules in guide training. A plane-on approach looked like an orb. The guide noted the strobe pattern, asked participants to check headings, and turned the failure into a checklist item. A string of satellites imitated intention. The guide reminded everyone to log duration and glide. A fog inversion bent car lights into floating orbs. The guide emphasized logging ground conditions. Each embarrassment became a future safeguard. Dreams often mirrored these lessons. Guides described presences, showing them how to soften their tone when correcting, how to use gestures instead of words to preserve silence, how to anchor themselves so others could lean into calm. Some woke with vivid impressions of being corrected themselves, told to wait longer before speaking, to exhale before gesturing, to breathe before deciding. Guides learned humility not as a virtue but as a survival skill. Auditing supported their growth. Logs from nights under their care were anonymized and checked. Did participants stay steady? Did they record before speaking? Did the group's times align? If not, auditors corrected the guide gently, modeling the same patience they expected guides to model in the field. And you? Have you ever been in a situation where calm leadership, not loud orders, changed the outcome? Share that memory in the comments. It could help others understand the power of steadiness. Guides also learned that their task was not only to manage nights of presence, but to manage nights of absence. Sometimes nothing happened and restlessness grew heavier than any light. A good guide reminded the group that nothing was data, that the practice was about showing up, not consuming spectacle. In those hours, patience was the lesson, and guides who could hold patience taught the group more than any hovering triangle ever could. By the end of their training, new guides understood that leadership was not about being the one in front, but about making sure no one was left behind. Their success was measured not in how much they could do, but in how little the group needed them. By the late 2000s, the culture of guides had multiplied. Every circle had at least one veteran and one trainee, ensuring continuity without dependence. The ethic demanded redundancy. If one guide moved away, the circle continued without pause. Authority that could not be distributed was authority that did not belong. The training process became seamless. A newcomer might begin by carrying supplies, then by reading satellite charts aloud, then by signaling silence during a session, and eventually by leading a full pre-brief and debrief. At each stage, the veteran stepped back further, until the group realized the newcomer had become the guide without ceremony. Leadership was passed like breath, unnoticed until it was already present. Phenomena often seem to acknowledge this handover. Nights when a new guide first carried full responsibility frequently included clean sequences: hush, hum, warmth, tang, brightening point, geometry held, collapse, dim. It was as if the phenomenon rewarded not authority but capacity multiplied. Logs from these nights became teaching tools, demonstrating that humility and leadership attracted coherence. Dreams reflected the same theme. New guides reported visions of standing before groups, being shown how to remain steady as presences moved closer, how to adjust the group's rhythm by altering their own, how to release tension without words. Veterans dreamed of handing over tools, of stepping aside without resentment, of being thanked not with applause but with silence. The dreams reinforced the ethic. Leadership was succession, not possession. Communities benefited from this multiplication. Families saw children guiding siblings through small silences. Workplaces noticed that participants carried the ethic of distributed authority into meetings, inviting quieter voices to speak. Schools adopted the practice of passing the pen to ensure that no student dominated notes. The training of guides was shaping not just circles but society. Quick pause. Do you think the best leaders are the ones you barely notice because the group itself becomes stronger? Leave your thoughts below. Your comment might resonate with others who have lived the same. By 2010, the network had more guides than it needed, which was exactly the point. Leadership had dissolved into culture. Anyone could arrive early, review charts, lead a breath, signal silence, and guide a debrief. Authority was no longer personal. It was procedural. The practice had protected itself from collapse by ensuring that no single figure mattered more than the method. The true legacy of guides was not that they kept circles steady, but that they taught humanity what leadership could mean. In a world addicted to heroes and hungry for spectacle, the circles discovered that the most powerful leaders were those who disappeared into method. Phenomena continued as always: points brightening, geometries holding, triangles collapsing, lights dimming without retreat. The preludes repeated faithfully: hush, hum, warmth, tang. Dreams rehearsed posture and breath. But what participants remembered most was not the lights. It was the calm gestures of guides, the hand raised for silence, the reminder to breathe, the patience to let newcomers learn without shame. Auditors summarized the ethic of guidance with a phrase that echoed across decades: capacity over charisma. Charisma fades, divides, and distracts. Capacity multiplies, steadies, and protects. A guide who sought followers had already failed. A guide who built replacements had already succeeded. The legacy spread into everyday life. Families practiced care before conflict because that was how guides kept circles intact. Workplaces adopted the ethic of rotation, refusing to let one voice dominate. Communities modeled patience during crisis because they had learned from guides who had faced the unknown without panic. The culture of guidance was no longer confined to fields. It had entered the bloodstream of society. Dreams of this era often showed guides standing before thresholds, being told to step aside so others could enter. The lesson was humility even at the edge of revelation. Humanity was being trained not to crown leaders but to cultivate capacity everywhere. Final reflection. What do you think matters more? The brilliance of a single leader or the steadiness of a community that needs none? Share your thoughts in the comments. By the mid-2010s, the role of guide had become almost invisible. Everyone was capable of stepping into it and no one needed to hold it permanently. Leadership had dissolved into culture. The phenomenon had not given humanity proof, but it had given it a model of leadership that could change more than encounters. It could change civilization. The story of the guides was not about command. It was about care. It was not about charisma. It was about capacity. It was not about owning authority. It was about passing it on until there was nothing left to pass, only a culture that guided itself. That was the true legacy of the anonymous circles. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who are also fascinated by UFOs. And leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened?